It's my 21st birthday, and my parents burst into my boyfriend's house, fists clenched, demanding I take down an Instagram post. Then my dad threatens to cut me off like I'm some kid he can still control. I'm Sadie, just a girl who wanted a slice of cake and a little love that day. But what I got instead was a fight that flipped my whole world upside down. I laughed in their faces. Cut me off what, your crumbs? And oh, you should have seen their jaws drop. What happened next? It's a story of finding family where I least expected it. And trust me, it's wilder than you'd guess. Have you ever had to stand up to someone you love or let them go? Tell me in the comments. I'd love to hear your take. The rain tapped a lazy rhythm against my window that morning, a soft gray curtain over Seattle that matched the quiet in my chest. I turned 21 overnight, officially too old to count the candles, I told myself with a half smile. And the first thing I did was reach for my phone on the nightstand. The screen glowed with a handful of Instagram spam, a coupon from some coffee shop I'd never been to, but nothing else. No missed calls, no cheery texts, not even a winking emoji from mom or dad. I swiped it open anyway, just in case I'd missed something in the night, but the emptiness stared back at me. No surprise there, I thought, letting the phone slip from my fingers onto the tangled sheets. I shuffled to the kitchen in my socks, the hardwood cool under my feet, and popped a bagel into the toaster. It was one of those stale ones from the back of the pantry, but it'd do. The cherry blossoms outside were drooping under the drizzle, their pink petals clinging to the glass like they didn't want to let go. Spring in Seattle always had that bittersweet feel, beautiful, but heavy with wet air. I watched them while the toaster hummed, trying to shake off the little knot forming in my stomach. Birthdays were supposed to feel special, weren't they? A milestone like 21 should have meant something. A call, a card, maybe even that awkward family dinner we hadn't had in years. But the silence from my folks wasn't new. It was just louder today. The memory crept in uninvited, sharp as the toaster's ping. I was 16, standing in our old living room with a hopeful grin, waiting for Mom to notice the date. Instead, she'd shoved a crumpled $10 bill into my palm, her eyes darting to Clara as my little sister twirled in her dance leotard, clutching a shiny trophy. "We'll celebrate later, Sadie," Mom had muttered, her voice half lost in the jingle of her keys as she hustled Clara out the door. Later never came, of course. Just a plate of leftover cake Clara didn't want, sitting on the counter like an apology nobody meant. I blinked the image away, fishing the bagel out and dropping it onto a plate. The crumbs scattered, and I didn't bother brushing them off. Some things don't change, I guess. I sank onto the couch, the springs creaking under me, and pulled up the family group chat on my phone. My thumbs hovered over the keys for a moment, hesitating before I typed, "Dinner tonight for my birthday?" Simple. Casual, like it didn't matter too much. I hit send and watched the little blue bubble float there, alone. The rain picked up outside, a steady patter now, and I kept one eye on the screen while I nibbled at the bagel. 10 minutes passed, then 20. I scrolled through old messages instead. Mom gushing over Clara's prom dress last year, Dad promising to fix Clara's car, a string of heart emojis for Clara's graduation pics. My name barely popped up, and when it did, it was usually me asking something practical like, "Can you grab milk?" No replies today, though, not even a scene. By noon, the bagel was gone, and the knot in my stomach had tightened into something else, something hot and familiar. I set the plate down harder than I meant to, the clink echoing in the quiet apartment. The cherry blossoms outside blurred as I stared at them, my throat closing up. I wasn't even a blip on their radar, was I? Not today, not ever. All those years of waiting for them to notice. Birthdays, school plays, quiet nights when I just wanted a conversation, and here I was, 21, still invisible. Life's funny that way. You can spend years hoping folks will see you, but sometimes they're too busy looking the other way. My phone buzzed once, cutting through the haze, and I snatched it up, heart jumping. Maybe Mom had remembered. Maybe Dad had a last-minute happy birthday up his sleeve. But it was just Clara, her name flashing across the screen in that bubbly font she'd picked. "Busy today, maybe next week," the text read, short and breezy, like she dashed it off between selfies. I let out a breath I didn't know I'd been holding, the air hissing past my teeth. Busy, right. I tossed the phone onto the couch, watching it bounce once, twice before settling among the bagel crumbs. Same old story, I thought, and the rain seemed to nod in agreement. The rain had turned insistent by afternoon, drumming against the windows of my little Seattle apartment like it was trying to get in. I'd been pacing for a while now, the hardwood creaking under my socks, leaving a faint rut where I'd circled past the couch too many times. Clara's text, "Busy today, maybe next week?" still glowed in my mind, each word a tiny jab I couldn't shake. My coffee sat cold on the counter, a thin brown ring staining the edge of the mug, and I kept glancing at it like it might tell me what to do next. It didn't, of course. So I picked up my phone instead, thumb hovering over Mom's name. I'd waited long enough, hadn't I? Maybe she'd just forgotten to reply earlier. Maybe 21 meant something after all. I tapped her number and pressed the phone to my ear, the ringing sharp against the steady patter outside. She picked up on the third try, her voice clipped and far off, like she was juggling 10 things at once. "Hey, Sadie, what's up?" she said, and I could hear the faint tap-tap of her nails against something, her steering wheel maybe, or the kitchen counter back home. I swallowed, keeping my tone light. "Just checking about tonight. Dinner for my birthday?" There was a pause, then a chuckle, low and careless, that sliced right through me. "Oh, honey," she said, the words dripping with that syrupy tone she used when she wasn't really listening. "We're taking Clara out tonight. She's got big news. Can't miss it." The tapping grew louder, a restless little rhythm, and I pictured her fussing with her purse, already half out the door. My chest tightened, but I pushed the words out anyway. "It's my 21st, Mom," I said, quieter than I meant to. Her laugh came again, sharper this time, like I'd told her a joke she didn't quite get. "We'll do something next weekend, okay? Don't make a fuss." The line crackled faintly, and I heard Clara's voice in the background, bright and bubbling. "Is that Sadie?" Before I could answer, the call clicked off, Mom's goodbye lost in the static. I stood there, phone still pressed to my ear, the silence roaring louder than the rain. My hand shook as I lowered it, the screen blurring in front of me. Don't make a fuss, like I was 5, whining over a broken toy. The phone buzzed again almost instantly, and I flinched, fumbling to answer. Clara this time, her voice chipper as ever. "Hey, Sadie, don't be mad, okay? We'll save you some cake. I promise it'll be good." She giggled, high and grating, like nails scraping chalk, and I could practically see her twirling her hair, all smug and carefree. My jaw clenched so hard my teeth ached. Cake. That's what I got. Crumbs from her table, same as always. I remembered sitting alone in the school auditorium back in 2020, the seats around me empty while Dad's voice echoed in my head. "Clara's game's more important, kiddo." He'd said it with a shrug, like it was no big deal, and I'd nodded because what else could I do? But now, at 21, that nod felt like a chain I'd worn too long. My hand trembled as I gripped the phone, Clara's laugh still ringing in my ears, the last straw on a pile that had been building for years. Something snapped inside me, a quiet crack I felt more than heard. I ended the call without a word, letting it drop onto the counter with a thud. The coffee mug wobbled as I slammed it down beside it, brown liquid sloshing over the edge, spreading a stain across the wood. My tiny rebellion, I thought, staring at the mess. I wasn't a kid anymore, waiting for their scraps of attention. I didn't need their cake or their promises, empty as the air in this apartment. The rain kept pounding, a steady beat that matched the thudding in my chest. I grabbed my phone again, scrolling past Mom's name, past Clara's, until I landed on Jasper's. My thumb hovered, hesitating, but only for a second. "I'll do it myself," I muttered, the words tasting like freedom as I pressed call. The line rang once, twice, and I paced again, the rut in the floor deepening. Sometimes you wait your whole life for folks to show up, but grace comes when you stop waiting and start choosing. Jasper's voice would be on the other end soon. I could feel it, and maybe, just maybe, that'd be enough. The rain had softened to a whisper by the time Jasper picked up, his voice steady through the phone like a hand reaching out in the dark. "Sadie," he said, and I didn't wait for more. I just let it all spill out, the silent morning, Mom's laugh, Clara's smug little promise of cake. My words tumbled over each other, raw and jagged until I ran out of breath. There was a beat of quiet on his end. Then he cut through it, calm as ever. "Get over here, we've got you." No hesitation, no questions, just that simple promise, warm as the light spilling from his folks' house when I pulled up later that evening. I sat in my car for a moment, engine ticking off, watching cherry blossoms catch the glow of streetlights in their Seattle suburb. The air smelled damp and sweet, and I could hear faint chatter drifting out from inside. I stepped onto the porch, sneakers scuffing the worn boards, and before I could knock, the door swung open. Evelyn stood there, her graying hair tucked into a loose bun, apron dusted with flour. She didn't say a word at first, just pulled me into a hug, her arms soft but firm, like she'd been waiting to do it all day. "Happy birthday, sweetheart," she murmured into my hair, and the knot in my chest loosened a fraction. I mumbled a thanks, my voice catching, and followed her inside. The kitchen was alive, steak sizzling on a cast-iron skillet, the sharp tang of garlic mixing with the warmth of baking bread. Holden looked up from the stove, his broad shoulders hunched over the pan, and flashed a grin that crinkled the corners of his eyes. 21, huh?" he said, sliding a cold soda across the counter. He clinked his glass against mine, the fizz bubbling up like a toast to something I hadn't named yet. Jasper appeared from the hallway, his dark hair still damp from a shower, and gave me a nod that said more than words could. I remembered him last month at that diner, grease-stained napkins piled between us, Holden clapping my shoulder and saying, "You're family now, kid." It had felt like a throwaway line then, but tonight, standing in their cozy chaos, it stuck. We didn't stay long at the house. Evelyn insisted we deserved something fancier than her kitchen for my 21st, so we piled into Jasper's truck, the four of us, and headed to a steakhouse downtown. The place was all warm wood and low lights, laughter bouncing off the walls as waiters darted between tables with trays of sizzling plates. My steak came medium rare, juicy and tender, and I let myself sink into the chatter. Evelyn teasing Holden about his overcooked burgers, Jasper recounting some dumb prank from work. For the first time that day, I didn't feel like I was waiting for something to go wrong. Halfway through my mashed potatoes, I pulled out my phone and snapped a quick photo of the restaurant's glowing sign outside. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, then typed, "Thanks to Jasper's family for making my birthday real." I hit post on Instagram, the little heart icon lighting up almost instantly with likes from old high school friends. I smiled to myself, cutting another bite of steak, the buttery taste melting on my tongue. Then my phone pinged, a sharp little chime that cut through the noise. I glanced down, expecting Jasper's sister or maybe a cousin, but it was Vivian's name glaring back at me. "What is this post, Sadie?" the text read, short and cold, like she'd typed it with one hand on her hip. My fork paused mid-air, a drop of gravy sliding down the tines. She'd seen it. Mom, who hadn't bothered with a happy birthday, was watching now. I set the fork down, my pulse ticking up, and caught Jasper's eye across the table. He tilted his head, a question in his look, and I slid the phone over so he could see. His mouth quirked up, just a flicker, before he passed the bread basket my way. His fingers brushed mine, warm and steady, a lifeline I hadn't known I needed until right then. "They're mad now," I said, smirking despite the twist in my gut. Jasper leaned back, soda in hand, and gave a small nod, like he'd expected it all along. Evelyn reached over, patting my arm with a gentle hand, her wedding ring catching the light. "Let them stew, honey," she said softly. "You're here, and that's what counts." I took a sip of my soda, the bubbles sharp against my throat, and let the warmth of the table settle over me. Family isn't always the folks you're born to, I thought. Sometimes it's the ones who show up when the rain's still falling. My phone stayed quiet after that, but I knew Mom's text was just the start. They'd seen me choose something better, and it had stung them in a way I hadn't expected. I popped a piece of bread into my mouth, savoring the crust, and wondered how long it'd take them to call. The steakhouse glow still lingered in my bones as we tumbled back into Jasper's living room that night, the air thick with the scent of pie and the hush of rain outside. I was perched on the edge of the couch, a fork poised over a slice of Evelyn's apple pie, laughing at Jasper's terrible impression of his boss when my phone started buzzing again. It'd been a war zone since Mom's text at dinner, missed calls stacking up like storm clouds, but I'd ignored them, letting the warmth of the room wrap around me instead. Jasper nudged my elbow, his grin wide, and I almost didn't hear the doorbell until it slammed 3 times, sharp and angry, rattling the quiet. My stomach dropped, pie forgotten, as Evelyn glanced toward the hall with a frown. "Who'd come by this late?" she murmured, but I already knew. The door flew open before anyone could reach it, and there they were, Vivian and Preston, storming in like they owned the place. Mom's scarf was a twisted mess around her neck, her fingers clawing at it as she fixed me with a glare that could have curdled milk. "Sadie," she snapped, her voice slicing through the chatter, "you're shaming us online." Dad loomed behind her, his broad frame tense, fists balled up at his sides like he was ready to smash something. "Take that post down, now," he growled, his jaw tight. I set the fork down slow, the metal clinking against the plate, and stood up. My legs felt steady, buzzing with something hot and alive, not the scared kid they'd left behind all those years. I wasn't that girl anymore, shrinking under their shadows. I took a breath, the air crackling between us, and let it out sharp. "You ditched me first," I said, my voice cutting through the room. 16, 18, and now 21, I'm done waiting. Mom's eyes widened, her scarf slipping to one shoulder as her hand froze mid-twist. I could see her back in 2019, pouting through her fake tears because I dared to sulk while Clara posed with her dance trophy, ruining her perfect family photo. "We've been busy," she sputtered now, but it sounded hollow, a worn-out script. Preston stepped closer, his knuckles whitening. "Delete it, Sadie, or you're cut off," he barked, his tone low and final like he thought it'd scare me into line. I laughed, a short bitter sound that startled even me, and it bounced off the walls. "Cut me off what? Your crumbs?" I shot back, the words tasting like defiance. The room went still, the air heavy and electric. Jasper shifted beside me, his shoulder brushing mine, a quiet anchor in the storm. Mom's gaze darted to him, her lips thinning, and I felt the flare of her jealousy, sharp and petty, like I'd stolen something she didn't even want. "You've got no right," she started, but I cut her off. "No right," I said, stepping forward. "I've spent years begging for a scrap of your time, birthdays, holidays, any day, and you couldn't even spare a phone call today. Jasper's folks gave me more in one night than you have my whole life." Evelyn stood near the kitchen doorway, her hands clasped calm and steady, while Holden watched from the armchair, his eyes narrowing at Preston's clenched fists. The tension hummed, a wire pulled too tight. Preston's face darkened, a vein pulsing at his temple. "You're throwing us away over this," he demanded, but it wasn't a question, it was a dare. I met his stare, unflinching. "You threw me away first," I said, soft but firm, and the truth of it hung there, heavy as the rain outside. Mom's scarf dangled now, half unraveled, and she clutched it like a lifeline. "We're your parents," she hissed, her voice dropping low, venomous. "You'll regret this, Sadie." The words slithered out, a threat wrapped in silk, but they didn't land like they used to. I'd heard them before, empty promises of guilt, and tonight they just slid off me. Jasper moved closer, his presence solid, and I caught the flicker of his jaw tightening as he watched Mom's glare shift between us. Evelyn stepped forward then, her voice gentle but sure. "Maybe you should head home," she said, nodding toward the door. Holden rose from his chair, slow and deliberate, his bulk a quiet wall between us and them. Preston opened his mouth, then shut it, his fists unclenching as he glanced at Holden. Mom's heels clicked once, twice, like she wanted to argue, but the fight was slipping out of her. I stood there, heart pounding, feeling the weight of years lift just a little. Sometimes standing up means letting go, I thought, and tonight I'd done both. The door creaked as they turned to leave, Mom's scarf trailing behind her like a flag of surrender. Her last hiss lingered in the air. "You'll regret this." But I didn't flinch. Jasper's hand brushed mine again, and I looked at him, the smirk tugging at my lips, mirroring his own. They could be mad all they wanted. I'd found something they couldn't take. The echo of Mom's last hiss, "You'll regret this," still hung in Jasper's living room as the door clicked shut behind them, but it didn't stick to me like it might have once. I stood there, the carpet soft under my socks, feeling the tension that had coiled tight all night start to unravel. They dangled money like a leash, waving it in front of me as if it'd pull me back into line, but I'd already slipped the collar. Years too late, maybe, yet right on time. The soda cans on the coffee table fizzed faintly, their sweat beating up in the dim light, and a single cherry blossom petal peeled off the window, drifting down like it had given up holding on. Outside, the rain had hushed to a murmur, leaving the air heavy and still. Vivian's voice came first, sharp and desperate before they'd even made it out. "No inheritance, Sadie, you're throwing it away," she'd spat, her scarf a tangled wreck in her hands, strands of wool catching on her rings. Her cool was cracking, that polished mask she'd worn my whole life slipping to show the panic underneath. I'd shrugged, the motion easy, almost careless. "Keep it," I said, letting the words roll out slow. "I've got people here who don't trade love for cash." Her mouth opened, then shut, like a fish gulping air, and I saw the flicker of something, anger, maybe, or hurt, cross her face. Preston muttered behind her, his voice low and hollow, "We're your family." But it landed flat, a tired line from a play nobody believed anymore. I could still hear Clara's car keys jingling in my head, that shiny gift for her 18th while I'd gotten a crumpled card and a "sorry busy" scribbled inside. That was their love. Shiny for her, scraps for me. Holden moved then, stepping forward from his spot by the armchair, his frame filling the room with a quiet strength. "You've said enough," he told them, his voice steady as the rain-soaked earth outside. "Time to go." Vivian froze, her heels rooted to the floor, scarf dangling like a flag of defeat, while Preston's shoulders slumped, the fight draining out of him. Evelyn stood near me, her presence warm and calm, and Jasper stayed close, his arm brushing mine. A wall of support I hadn't earned, but somehow had. Mom's eyes darted between us, her lips tightening as she took in Jasper's steady gaze, Evelyn's gentle hand on my elbow. She didn't like it, I could tell, this picture of me standing tall without her, but there was nothing she could do about it now. Preston shuffled toward the door, tugging at his coat, and Vivian followed, her heels clicking hard against the wood, each step a little stab of defiance. The door swung shut with a soft thud, and I let out a breath I hadn't known I was holding. Through the crack, Mom's voice slipped back in, a whisper that snaked through the quiet. "This isn't over," she said, low and deliberate, like a promise she meant to keep. But it didn't weigh me down, not this time. I felt lighter, untethered, like a kite finally cut loose from a fraying string. The room settled around me, soda fizzing, the faint creak of the house easing into the night. Evelyn squeezed my shoulder, her lavender scent drifting over me, grounding me in a way Mom's sharp perfume never had. "You're all right, honey," she murmured, and I nodded, believing it. Jasper sank onto the couch beside me, stretching his legs out with a sigh, and Holden eased back into his chair, rubbing his hands together like he'd just finished a chore. "They'll cool off," he said, though his tone suggested he didn't much care if they did. I picked up my soda, the can cool against my palm, and took a long sip, letting the bubbles fizz away the last of the heat in my chest. My phone lit up on the table, a sudden glow that caught my eye. Vivian again. "Lawyers next, Sadie," the text read, stark and cold, her final swing. I stared at it, the screen blurring for a second, then set the can down with a soft clink. A lawyer. Fine. Let her try. I leaned back, the couch springs groaning under me, and caught Jasper watching me, his eyes soft but steady. "You good?" he asked, voice low enough that it felt just for me. I nodded again, a small smile tugging at my lips. "Yeah," I said and meant it. Evelyn bustled toward the kitchen, muttering about reheating the pie, and Holden chuckled, the sound rumbling through the room. Outside, Preston's shadow lingered in the rain for a moment before fading into the dark, but it didn't matter. I'd made my stand, and the folks around me now were the ones who'd stayed. You don't always get to pick your family, I thought, but you sure can choose who you keep close, and that's a gift worth more than any inheritance. The kitchen light cast a soft glow over us late that night, spilling across Jasper's table where soda glasses sat half empty, their faint clinking a quiet soundtrack to the peace settling in. Mom's lawyer threat, lawyers next, Sadie, had flashed across my phone just minutes ago, but it didn't claw at me like it might have before. Their warnings kept coming, sharp little darts flung from miles away, but I was already beyond their reach, tucked here in a place that felt more like home than anywhere I'd ever known. The rain outside had dwindled to a whisper, and through the window, cherry blossoms caught the streetlights, glowing pink against the dark. I leaned back in my chair, the wood creaking under me, and let out a long, slow breath. My phone buzzed again, insistent, and I picked it up with a grin tugging at my lips. Another text from Vivian. "You'll pay, lawyer's coming." Her words were all edges, meant to dig in, but they just made me chuckle. I tapped out a reply, quick and sure. "Keep it all," and hit send, watching the little blue bubble float off into the ether. No hesitation, no second thoughts. Then Preston's voice messages started pouring in, one after another, his deep growl spilling through the speaker as I hovered my thumb over them. Ranting, frantic, the same old tune, guilt and anger mashed together. I swiped each one away, deleting them mid-sentence, my shoulders loosening with every flick. The weight I'd carried so long, years of chasing their approval, was slipping off like an old coat I didn't need anymore. Jasper slid into the seat beside me, his arm brushing mine as he set his glass down. "You're done with them," he said, his voice low and proud, a quiet certainty in it that warmed me more than the soda ever could. I nodded, resting my head against his shoulder for a moment, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. Evelyn bustled over from the counter, her apron still dusted with flour from earlier, and lifted her glass. "To Sadie's real 21st, she said, her smile crinkling her eyes, and Holden joined in, his deep chuckle rumbling as he clinked his soda against ours. "Brunch tomorrow," he added, "somewhere with those fancy pancakes you like." I laughed, picturing syrup-soaked stacks, and the sound felt easy, free. The memory flickered in then, me at 10, tugging at Mom's sleeve, begging for a hug while she turned away, her hands busy with Clara's braids, her voice sharp. "Not now, Sadie." I'd stood there, small and silent, watching her fuss over my sister's perfect little curls. That ache had stayed with me, a shadow I'd dragged through every birthday since. But tonight it faded, washed out by the clink of glasses and Evelyn's gentle laugh filling the room. I pushed my chair back and stepped toward the door, slipping outside into the cool night air. It kissed my face, crisp and clean, carrying the faint salt of the sound on the breeze. The cherry blossoms shimmered under the streetlights, delicate and bright, and I stood there, letting it sink in. This was home now, not a house I'd been born into, but one I'd chosen. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a soft ping that broke the stillness. I pulled it out, the screen lighting up with Clara's name. "You messed up big," her text read, short and smug, like she'd been waiting to toss it my way. I stared at it for a second, then pressed the power button, watching the screen fade to black. A smile curled my lips as I slipped it back into my jeans, the night wrapping around me like a blanket. Back inside, Holden's arm rested on my empty chair, a steady anchor, and Evelyn's laugh drifted out, bright and full. This was what family felt like, not threats or scraps, but a table full of folks who stayed. I lingered on the porch a little longer, the cool air brushing my cheeks, and thought about how life turns sometimes. You can spend years running after love that won't sit still, but peace comes when you stop chasing and start building it yourself. The rain might have stopped, but the blossoms held their glow, and I knew I'd wake up tomorrow, 21 and free, with a family I'd picked, not one I'd lost. As I stood on Jasper's porch that night, the cherry blossoms glowing soft under the streetlights, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years, a freedom earned, not given. I'd spent so long chasing a family that wouldn't see me, but found one in folks who chose to stay when it mattered most. Life's a funny thing. Love doesn't always come from where you expect, but it blooms where you let it take root. If my little story stirs something in you, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Maybe over a cup of coffee or a quiet evening chat. It's those shared moments that keep us connected, don't you think?